English translation, 355th contact, Friday, 2nd April, 2004, 0.17 hours.
I was just outside with Karen, who is on night duty. I talked to her for a while and told her she might see your ship. Welcome and greetings, my friend.
Thank you for your welcome and also be greeted. When I fly away, I want to do it so Karen can watch me.
I am sure she will be pleased. If I can hammer you right away with my questions?
There is nothing against it.
Good, thanks. Well, during your last visit, I asked you whether it is customary for you, as for us here on Earth, for men to cry out for artificial erectile dysfunction drugs, and if you can take a closer look at Viagra.
I explained that I found it shameful and unworthy that such artificial means for potency enhancement, sex pleasures, and degenerate sex practices are used by terrestrial men. If potency drops due to any illness or other physical circumstances and cannot be regenerated, then such means should not be used, but only natural substances. If even these are no longer helpful, then there is no shame if the potency can no longer be brought to bear. Such things also occur with us, which is, however, carried with decency and composure. If we have lost our potency, for whatever reason, and it can no longer be regenerated naturally, then it is common practice for us to accept this and not create any problems from it. According to our ethics, to use potency-enhancing substances for pure sexual pleasure or degenerate sex practices is a disgraceful act and is equivalent to prostitution, which we consider reprehensible and do not practice. With regard to Viagra, I have taken possession of this drug, analyzed it very carefully, and found that it contains very dangerous substances that can be not only harmful to health, but can even be fatal, and not only for people with heart disease. Moreover, certain substances have such an effect that prolonged use can result in irreparable impotence, not only in the sense of inability to orgasm and sexual intercourse, but also in the sense of infertility due to sterility caused by Viagra, because certain substances of this drug slowly but continuously paralyze and kill sperm.
Impotence can have many causes. It can be hereditary as well as disease-related, and therefore of physical and psychological origin, as well as temporary or permanent. Causes can be, for example, malformations of the penis or testicles, as well as immune deficiency or weakness of the body. Other causes include fear, lack of self-confidence, nervousness, spinal cord disorders and metabolic disorders. And what should not be forgotten is, of course, heavy alcohol consumption as well as drug and medication abuse, although there are also various other causes, as Ketzel once explained to me.
Your explanation corresponds to the truth.
Thank you. Then I can rest assured that I said nothing wrong. Then you could actually tell me what you told me about the Satipatthana meditation method, that you found some more about it in your father's Svath bequest.
In this matter, I would like to refer back to our conversation that we had together at the 249th official meeting on the 13th of June, 1994. Allow me to read and repeat our conversation here, because only then the whole context is given. When you receive the report of the conversation and write it down to make it publicly accessible. Here is what you said. Then I have something on my own behalf. The meditation teachings that I have written, I had basically learned from Svath and from Ask It, whereby I had already written some things about it at a young age, before I brought it into its final form in the 70s and published it. And exactly because of this meditation, that is to say, the meditation book, Introduction to Meditation, it happened for the second time that I was accused that I had copied my work from another book. I gave you the following answer. I am aware of this stupid allegation. The relevant book for this, which you are being accused of having copied from, is entitled Mind Training Through Mindfulness. But you should not be bothered by this stupid slander because, as you yourself know very well, it is not based on truth in any wise. The truth is that, although you may not remember that Svath translated the Satipatthana method from Pali and Sanskrit into German, which Asket did again in 1954, so you had practically two identical translations. From the translation of Svath, in 1948, when you were 11 years old, in the 4th grade of school, and under the guidance of teacher Lehman, you wrote a manuscript of 83 pages, which was so good that it was copied 200 times by the teacher on a printing machine and sent to many people, including the monk Rahat Sanghanan, whom you later met with the help of Asket and who taught you many things. His monk name was Mahachohan, which means Great Master. He was also the one who made several copies of your work in 1948 and sent them to his peers, from which the first writings were already made. In 1954, Asket made you a new translation, from which you revised and rewrote your meditation scripture, which you then submitted together with Asket to the monk Rahat Sanghanan the same year that Asket brought you to him. He liked your work very much and made copies of it again, which he in turn sent to his peers. Then in 1964, when you were in Marauli, India, at Ashoka Ashram with Swami Dharmawara, you revised your work again in 3 months, and Swami Ramana Sarma, who was called Ananda Mahatma, meaning happy great soul, had it printed in scripture after he translated it into English. He also distributed this scripture in 2,600 copies, 2,100 copies more than Monk Rahat Sanghanan had done in 1954. So since 1948, since your first work on meditation, various meditation books have been produced elsewhere with your material, but the individual authors have never mentioned or made it clear that the works were produced from your material. On the contrary, the individual authors always claim to be the creators of the writings or books themselves, and even claim to be the translators of the original Pali and Sanskrit texts, although it is true that this work was done by Svath and Asket. Several of the claimants do not know either Pali or Sanskrit. Our dialogue then continued with your question, and what about the person who wrote the book you mentioned? Where did this person get the knowledge of the meditation teachings I wrote? I explained the following. You mean the Buddhist monk Nyanaponika, who drew his meditation wisdom from your writing, as well as from various others. He and various others also had at his disposal the translations of Svath and Asket. Now I have to add the following. According to my father's legacy records, the meditation teaching of the Satipatthana method belongs to Theravada, which according to our understanding is the teaching of the religious elders, and at the same time the name of the oldest form of Buddhism, called Pali Buddhism, whose writings are also written in Pali and Sanskrit. This teaching, however, only came into being on earth after the death of Buddha and was created and recorded by 500 religious elders. The actual origin of the teaching, however, lies very far back, namely with Nakademian, who in primeval times developed the Satipatthana meditation teaching as mindfulness meditation, which was brought to the earth from the depths of space by the travelers from far away and was taken up by the first Buddhism, namely by Pali Buddhism. This teaching was also recorded in writing but never translated into other languages. Only at the end of the 30s in the 20th century were first attempts made to translate the meditation teachings into other languages, with a Buddhist monk in former Ceylon, known as Therunansa, a priest of the Buddha, being the authoritative person. Unfortunately, however, the Second World War nipped everything in the bud, causing great disabilities, and consequently everything was taken up and completed only later. In this completion, however, your manuscript of the meditation method, which you have worked out from Svatha's translation, already played an important role after your teacher Gustav Lehmann copied everything, and in March 1948 sent your work to India to a Buddhist religious elder, the monk Maha Chohan, whose civil name was Rahat Sanganan for translation into English. Being proficient in the German language, he translated the 83 pages of your manuscript into English, together with other monks who also knew the German language and were partly of German descent, in less than a month. This translation, together with your German text, was then mechanically reproduced again and in May 1948 sent to many other Buddhist elders and several ashrams, including the Buddhist monk Nyanaponika, who, like many others, drew his meditation wisdom from it, as I explained in 1994. Then in 1964, when you were in Mahrauli at the Ashoka Ashram and came into contact with Ramana Sarma through the mediation of Dharmawara, he translated everything into English again, since he was also able to speak German. He got your early documents from Dharmawara, who himself was in possession of your meditation teachings in German and English.
I understood that. But do you know anything else about the Satipatthana meditation method also being practiced in Burma?
This is indeed the case, although it has to be said that it was only through the detour of Burmese or Sinhala Buddhist monks in the 1930s that Indian Buddhists became aware again of the Satipatthana meditation method, which had been practiced in Burma since 1879.
And how did the Burmese get involved?
My father, Svath, had personal contact with a religious superior in Burma in the 19th century, from 1859 to 1907, when the monk died. My father taught him the Satipatthana meditation form, which the religious superior introduced and made compulsory. This religious superior was also proficient in the German language, for he was a born German, like various other Buddhist monks in Burma and India. Consequently, he also spread self-written writings concerning Satipatthana meditation, namely as far as India and Ceylon, where decades later it was also taken up by the Thirunanse. So already at the end of the 30s and beginning of the 40s in India and Ceylon, my father Svath's German translation of Nokadimian's Satipatthana meditation method was in use, which was then used for the German books as well as your explanations, which were taken over in the same sense and partly literally.
Thank you, my friend. You have answered many questions. But I am still a little surprised. In 1950, the first book of the meditation teachings was published in German. So the whole thing was based on Svath's translation, which was distributed from Burma, as well as on my little work?
That is right, because that too is clearly evident from my father's notes, which he kept in a diary of all his work on Earth.
Thank you, that will do. Look here, I want to make more postcards of this, here of the Plieran alphabet, and of this spiritual teaching symbol that Piero has so beautifully worked up. What do you think about it?
The idea is good, but if I may express another wish for the postcards?
Of course. What should be changed or improved?
Nothing like that, my friend. My wish is that a postcard be made with portraits of all of us. By this I mean the portrait of my father Svath, my daughter Simya Se, drawn by group members, and of course yours and Quetzal's.
Yes, your wish is our command. Piero will be thrilled and will certainly work hard to achieve something perfect.
That is what I ask for. I would also like to have some copies.
Sure thing. You intend to put up posters in your giant room?
Of course, and besides, I will be trading it. Ha ha ha.
Great idea. We will soon have lots of fans. But joking aside, what do you know about how things will develop in Iraq and with regard to international terrorism in the future? And what will happen in terms of the economy, crime, and families?
Unfortunately, a very dark time is approaching, which will be determined by the terror of U.S. Americans and Israel, because their military terror will create enormous counter-terror, mainly by religious fanatics and zealots in Islamic terrorist camps and actual terrorist organizations. On top of that, there are free riders of all shades, religions and sects, which will cause just as much disaster worldwide and will cause many deaths and bring much destruction as the criminal military actions of Israel and the U.S. America do. Already, worldwide, a dangerous form of anarchism has formed out of the military terror of the USA and Israel, as well as the actual terrorist organizations, which can only be stopped if the U.S. Americans from all over the world withdraw to the USA and furthermore elect peace-loving governments. However, order would also have to be established in Israel in this respect, because this country too is an evil from which criminal monstrosities have been constantly emerging and have been since time immemorial. And that there will be peace there in the foreseeable future is not yet apparent. The same is true of Iraq, where a secret civil war has been going on for some time now, through the fault of the Americans, as well as an underground war directed against the occupying forces, which will soon be fought openly. The fratricidal and underground war is being waged in such a terrorist form that soldiers of the occupying powers, as well as Iraqis who are considered to be British and American friendly, as well as other foreigners who are in the country as tourists or reconstruction helpers, are murdered by terrorist acts or otherwise come to harm by terrorist attacks. In addition, it comes still that in this terror also the different Islamic faith groups in Iraq are included, consequently also these groups fight each other terroristically up to the death. The occupying powers are to blame for this, because through their war they have created these terror possibilities. Because the warlords Bush Jr. and Blair and their followers and supporters are too lowly intelligent and uneducated to have been able to predict the consequences of their actions. Tony Blair, George W. Bush and Ariel Sharon, as well as Yasser Arafat, have been the most dangerous elements on the planet for some time, and are still the most dangerous because they are the ones who have sown the seeds of destruction for the present time. And they will continue to do so unless they are stopped, unless they are removed from their offices by popular violence, and unless they are not severely held accountable for their crimes. Of course, there are still many despots in various states on the earth, who also have to be removed from their offices and replaced by good governments. And what I want to say, even in your home country, Switzerland, the people are being taken for fools by certain government powers who are willing to treacherously sell off the country and the people to the dictatorship of the European Union. And if this silver coin deal goes through, then bad things will happen for Switzerland and its people. Switzerland is still a lonely and precious island of a certain peace and freedom and a hearth of peace. But if the betrayal of the country and its people comes about through EU accession, then it will be over. This will already be signaled by the rash acceptance of the Schengen agreements, which will happen soon. But back to the real-world situation. All around, the terror of all shades will increase, just as the sectarianism will expand and lead to many murders and suicides in sectarianism. Furthermore, there is the threat of war by the states of power, but also civil wars and bloody guerrilla and revolutionary struggles. And with regard to the business, corporate and world economy, mismanagement and cheating continues to be practiced, both in leadership, investment, and thus debt driving, but also with regard to the exploitation of companies, corporations, the world economy, and the state by the greedy, such as managers, board members, and state powers. Of course, those of the above-mentioned who are honest and not greedy for profit suffer from this, because they are the ones who have to take the rap for the fallible. And while I am at it, also with regard to family life, everything will continue to change badly, because marriages will be even more unstable than before, which will result in many murders due to disruption and jealousy, etc., and even whole families will be wiped out. Not infrequently, psychiatrists are to blame for this, who, as a result of their megalomania and their non-understanding of the human psyche, they are unable to assess at-risk humans. As a result of which, as you once said, they are then let loose on humankind, whereby they can then cause deadly harm instead of being locked away. Furthermore, and this must also be mentioned, the handling of law is far too lax, whereby far too little punishment is pronounced and carried out, which leads to the fact that the crimes of all branches are increasing and getting out of hand. Many crimes, even those in which humans are killed, such as by alcoholism, are trivialized and treated as trivial offenses, although the killing of a person is in any case irrefutably a murder, which as such must be punished severely and justly. Incorrigible criminals, and I must speak of this too, must be excluded from society for life and locked away, which also applies to rapists of women, but also to shameful people who sexually abuse children. Parents who mistreat, beat, or abuse their children, neglect, or even let them degenerate must also be severely punished, as must any man who beats his wife or any woman who beats her husband.
Law enforcement is really very lax and very much in line with the effeminate nature of humans today. Therefore, many crimes are only partially pronounced. In my opinion, this should not be the case, because every crime is punishable, so a real punishment must also be appropriate. But there is no conditional punishment. An offense says that it is punishable, but nobody thinks about that. A distinction can only be made between a criminal offense and a misdemeanor, in such a wise that a criminal offense is inevitably punished with a severe penalty, whereas a conditional penalty can be imposed for a misdemeanor if the offense is repeated, so that in the worst case it must then be punished as a criminal offense or assessed with a financial penalty. I have learned this from Nocodemian's storage bank.
This is actually what it should be. But now, my friend, must I go? Thanks for your work here. Goodbye. Next Thursday I am doing the proofreading again.
Good, then goodbye.